Our last session is going to be advising clients on scams, abuse, wills, replacing legal documents, etc. And for this presentation, we have Angie Dorsey from Legal Aid of North Carolina, the Senior Law Project. Where's Angie? I didn't see her. And we have Carol Brook from the Justice Center. Carol's here. See her coming down. We also have David Kirkman from the Attorney General's Office and Hugh Harris. And they're passing out materials now. Now, I don't know David. I don't know you well. I think we've met before, but many of you know David. David, this is you're almost your legal aid swan song, right? Since
it is my Attorney General's swan song.
It's David's Attorney General swan song. David is a former legal services attorney, and he's been with the Attorney General's office, through 11 administrations, I think, or something like that. But I'll turn it over to you guys, David. Thank you.
Is our slide first? Or is it?
I don't know. We'll turn it on, see who's first.
All right.
Where's the clicker?
Yeah. All right. Want me to go ahead and start first?
Have at it.
Good afternoon. My name is Hugh Harris. I'm an Assistant Attorney General with the North Carolina Department of Justice Consumer Protection Division. We do have a handout for you. And as you heard, colleague David Kirkman, this will be his last month with our office, and of course I tried to get his cell phone number, home address, so I can keep getting information from him on consumer protection. He's a great resource to all of us there. Honestly, my office is next to his, and I can't tell you the amount of attorneys that come to his office seeking information, whether it's about judges, different issues they have with Chapter 75, or bankruptcy, or federal court. He's done it. It's been a great resource to us.
Thank you.
I'm sure he knows. I'm just going to go over some areas. Obviously, let's see. Let's just go to the next slide so we can. So I'm going to talk about advance fee grant, loan scams, price gouging, flood damaged vehicles. Landlord-tenant has been covered very well by earlier, and phony charities. That's good. Basically, again, our office operates out of Chapter 75, 1.1. It's unfair and deceptive trade practices statute. Obviously, attorneys, you guys obviously can operate out of that statute also. And obviously, focusing on advice to your client, some of the key things, and I've talked to private lawyers before who've called our office. A lot of us at the Consumer Protection Division, we specialize in different areas. So we will get a call sometimes from attorneys, which is good. We will advise you, or I advise attorneys, to file a consumer complaint on behalf of their client. That's fine. Some attorneys will attach a letter of representation so we know who you are. A lot of times I'll call the attorney just to discuss the consumer complaint or the area that they're complaining about. But it lets us know, which is very important, it lets us know what's going on out there, who's committing a scam or a possible scam, what company or what person. And also it can help you as the attorney if it is a particular person. Sometimes these guys have done this before, so they'll come up with a new name for a company, or they'll use an alias. But we have that information. We also have access, obviously, to consumer complaints. We can tell you how many we have received. Obviously, keep copies, and I'm sure you guys know that. You can send in copies of invoices, receipts, business cards, any sort of information, and also the names that your client has dealt with is key, those individuals. Talking about advance fee grant, and again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Some of these areas, I'm not, it's not my area, but I did talk to the attorneys who specialize in this, but I, got some information from them. So advance fee grant and loan scams, basically what you're looking for, if if your client paid up front, you shouldn't have to pay up front for a grant or loan. It seems like common sense to all of us. We're attorneys, we kind of know this. But you can't imagine the situation that the person can be in after a disaster, or even during that period of time after a disaster has occurred. A lot of times we'll receive these consumer complaints weeks or maybe a month after the disaster has occurred. The person returns home, and these people may come door to door. Or during the disaster, for example, with FEMA that was talked about earlier, you could have a person that could come up to your client's door saying, hey, I can help you fill out the application. Just give me this fee. I'll fill out the application for FEMA for you. You'll be front of the line or something. They'll tell them stuff because they're very good at this. So those are some of the things, obviously, that should raise flags to you when you see that. And again, it's fine to file a complaint with our office. You're not going to interfere with any investigation we have. I think that actually helps us and lets us know what's going on out there. And again, they shouldn't have to pay an application fee, the middleman, and there's a loan broker statute. It's NCGS 66-106. So that's the statute, and obviously we're back under Chapter 75 also with the Unfair and Deceptive Trade Practices Act. Talking about price gouging. Price gouging obviously can deals with goods, services. A lot of people will think about buying gas, but it also can be for hotel rooms, other goods, water, things like that. After Hurricane Matthew, and I talked to the attorney in this area, we received over 1,400 consumer complaints. Obviously that's covering, again, all of those different areas, those goods. That's quite a few consumer complaints going on there. It is good if the clients take pictures. They can take pictures, for example, if it's a gas station that all of a sudden they feel the price is unfair, they can take a picture of it. If they still have their cell phone, something like that. All of that information helps us, copies of receipts, things like that. The price gouging statute is 75-37 and 75-38. Basically, when the governor declares a state of emergency, he'll issue in there in the declaration that the price gouging statute is in effect, and he did that for Hurricane Matthew. Also, it can come into effect if there's a disruption in services. I know we had that gas pipeline explosion thing probably 2 weeks before the hurricane, and I think that kind of put that statute in effect also. The statute, again, talks about charging too much in times of crisis. It also looks at suppliers, manufacturers, retailers. And another important thing about that is, let's see here. The key term that's used there, it's basically a price that is unreasonably excessive. And what does that mean? The statute breaks that down. It's got like 3 factors. Basically, we'll look at 60 days preceding the natural disaster. What did that price look like, the average price for that retailer? Whether or not it's attributable to the suppliers, the rise in the price, and whether or not it's attributable to the commodities markets for that. Flood damaged vehicles. I talked to the attorney that heads that area, and he talked to me for about 30 minutes about his area, which I kind of did look like a deer in headlights at times, but I did get the key stuff. I wanted to give you guys the key stuff. So you think about a disaster that happens, obviously the home, but the vehicles. And obviously that's the last thing you hope that a person is looking at. They're looking at their life, their safety, shelter, food, but soon they're going to have to return home and see that vehicle there. The vehicle may not work, so they may have to purchase a new vehicle. Obviously there are some statutes that cover that, so you don't purchase a flood damaged vehicle, or any of us if you're in the market to buy a vehicle. Statute is 20-71.4, and also another statute is 20-354.1. And this talks about the disclosure of flood damaged vehicles. And also, they're supposed to give you, in writing if the estimate cost or any repair cost is in excess of $350. But also with a disaster, you want to look at towing of vehicles, because that's something I didn't think about. He kind of brought it up to me. Well, what if the vehicle's stuck, it doesn't work, or it's stuck in water, or what have you? Well, a tow truck company's going to come. What if they're charging some enormous price? Well, then that's price gouging. You kind of want to look at that. But also you want to look at, he explained to me a specific situation that kind of raised his ears, and he said, man, they were charging so much. But I looked at where the vehicle was, and the tow truck owner kind of explained, look, the vehicle was stuck in water. So I had to use more equipment, extra stuff. That's why I charged more during that period of time. Moving on to charities. Charities, obviously, you can look at the North Carolina Secretary of State charitable solicitation. They license all charities. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's on their website. All charities in North Carolina should be licensed. You can get that information from them, or you can inquire from our office. Charities can affect all of us here in North Carolina and people out of state wanting to donate, for example, for Hurricane Matthew. So, again, contact our office. It's perfectly fine. If you have a question about it, you have a client in there. My basic recommendation is some of the areas that I've had, like I said, attorneys that have contacted me. One in particular, I thought he kind of went ahead of himself. He interpreted the statute himself and sent like a demand letter, and I looked at it. I looked at the complaint and the documents, and I said, wait a second, that's not the way I would interpret it. So it's fine, again, to call us before you send a demand letter or anything like that. But within the demand letter, I would cite these statutes in there. Let's see. Also, you can look at, as a resource, I'm sure everyone knows the internet is great. You have the bloggers in there. That's a lot of stuff in there. But you also have the Better Business Bureau on there. You can kind of see what other complaints are out there. If the client's in your office, they're naming a particular person or company, you can kind of get a feel and see what's out there. I think, hopefully I don't run over. That should do it.
Get the clicker from you, please.
Oh, sure.
Again, I'm Dave Kirkman, and George did mention that I was a former legal aid lawyer. The reason I got my job 3 decades ago in the Attorney General's office was because I was a former legal aid lawyer. The Attorney General wanted to hire 3 new attorneys, and he wanted legal aid lawyers. Phil Lehman was another one that was hired the same week as I. Randy Miller, also a former legal aid attorney, was hired. And the desire of the Attorney General back then was to amp up our street cred with the local bar, with the judges, and with the business community. And he selected us as former legal aid lawyers because we knew exactly how to go into court. We knew all these statutes that are being discussed today. And that I'm just very grateful to have had that opportunity to work in legal services a long, long time ago. But right now, what I do at the Attorney General's office, I mainly deal with heading up our elder fraud unit. A lot of the home repair scams that we're going to talk about specifically target seniors. A lot of the other charity scams that we've alluded to target particularly seniors and repeatedly victimize them. They don't just get them once, they get them several times. I first started noticing that seniors were targeted when we had our first major disaster in North Carolina during my tenure in the Attorney General's office. That was Hurricane Hugo back in 1989. And from Hurricane Hugo and all the subsequent disasters, I've come to realize that each one of these disasters is different. The scammers think outside the box, just like our attorney colleague kept saying this morning, think outside the box, think outside the box. They always tailor their scams and their pitches to the latest type of event. So for wind events, such as Hurricane Fran back in 1996, usually all the damage is going to be on the top of the house or the side of the house. It's going to be something that does not require a licensed contractor or a licensed electrician. It's not going to require any sort of inspection by a government official. The scammers can just show up the next morning and start saying, well, we'll take this tree off your house. It'll be $6,000. We need a crane to do so. Better leave the house while we do it. Next thing you know, they're cutting this rather small tree off and throwing it in the yard. And when the victim comes back, they say that'll be $6,000. Again, they don't need any sort of inspection to do that. And after Hurricane Fran, they were there in people's yards the very next morning as soon as the sun came up. Additionally, the type of work that they do on the roofs, like they'll tell people, all your wood decking under your roof has been damaged by these trees. We need to pull it out, put in new wood, and put on a whole new row of shingles across the top of your house. That'll be $9,000. And a lot of these people believing this will say, go ahead. And all the scammers are going to do is just put an overcoat of new shingles on top of what's basically a totally sound roof and charge that money and run on. Similarly with ice events, it's the same sort of thing. We also have a lot of complaints after ice events where the prices of, say, generators have gone through the roof, and they usually do. We get these price gouging complaints. Events like Matthew, where there's a lot of flooding, if there's one silver lining to that type of event, is that the scammers, the home repair scammers, who are huge in number, have a very difficult time getting into the disaster areas to begin with. Usually they're cut off, they can't be there the next morning. The structural damage that occurs almost always requires an inspection before repairs can even begin. It requires typically a licensed general contractor because the damage is more than $30,000. That's the threshold. It's going to require a licensed electrician, licensed plumbers, all kinds of permits. So in these sorts of events, the scammers, they think outside the box, they change up their game, and what they'll do is cleanup scams, they call them. They're not going to do any sort of structural work or electrical repairs. They're going to start pulling rugs out or furniture out, or they'll set a fan in the house after the homeowner pays them $2,000 or $3,000, and then they'll disappear. They'll just totally disappear. This is something that also engenders a lot of charity scams. A lot of older people in particular are extremely upset about the news stories about people who have suffered disasters, the people that we've been talking about so compassionately today. People all around the country and all across the state will see, these pictures on the TV screen, and they will want to write a check to anybody. And so they're going to be inundated with telemarketing calls from charity scammers and with mail from people who aren't really legitimate charities to begin with. Another thing that happens after events like this, and this is sort of like the second wave of scams, is that so-called storm chasers will show up. And they're usually people who say, you have had some sort of wind damage or hail damage to the roof of your house, Mr. Kirkman. Can I go up there and look? It'll be totally free. And they'll come back and they'll say, oh, you've got hail damage. And it could be hail damage that you suffered 3 or 4 years ago, but you'll say, you've got hail damage. I will work with your insurance company to get you a check to start the repairs. And sure enough, they will work with the insurance company. They will get you a check to get your roof repaired. They'll ask you to sign it over to them so they can go buy the materials, and then they're gone. They're just gone. So a lot of these types of scams, you'll see examples of them scattered throughout this booklet that we handed out. And many of them are what we call repeat victimization scams. And so for a lot of these homes that are damaged by floodwaters, even after the homes have been repaired, these scammers are going to show up and say, well, we need to inspect your foundation to see if all that water is causing it to crack. And sure enough, when they get out from under the crawl space, they're going to say, Mr. Kirkman, your foundation needs waterproofing, your house is going to get all moldy again. For $2,000, we'll take care of it. As soon as I write that check, they're just going to slap some white paint on the inside of the crawl space and be gone. And they'll do things like, oh, there's mold in your walls. We need to spray the inside of your walls. There's mold up in your attic. We've got to do that as well. Again, it's $2,000 or $3,000 a pop, or however much the victim can pay. It could be just $200. So what do you do when you end up with somebody like that? What do you do when you have one of these scammers? If they're like the home repair guys, here's some of our home repair scammers. They're part of a large home repair gang that's based out of the Wilson Rocky Mount area. As soon as they get the money from victims like these, half of it's going to go to their cocaine or their heroin dealer, half of it's going to go to their truck dealer for their tricked out truck, and the rest is going to go to their girlfriend, because they funnel the money away as fast as they can. And if you as attorneys get involved in one of these cases, you're actually lucky enough to identify who one of these scammers might be, and you say, okay, Larry House, you ripped off my elderly client with a mold abatement scam. She paid you $2,000. I want the money back. He's just going to laugh at you. You have to think outside the box, like our colleague said earlier. About the only thing that gets people like this to pay, whether they're these storm chasers who do the roof scams or these guys who do the home repair scams, the only thing that really makes them pay is a criminal charge. You need to be able to pick up the phone and call your friend, the district attorney, some police detective that you know well, sheriff's deputy, detective, and let them know what happened to your client. You can call us too. We'll give you as much information as we can on these people and what they've done in other counties and other communities. But what you really want to have happen is for them, the scammers, to be charged with obtaining property by false pretenses, General Statute 14-100, or with financial exploitation of an elderly person, that's GS 14-112.2. And often, as soon as these guys are charged and brought into the police station, another person's going to show up. It's either going to be the girlfriend with all the money to repay Mrs. Jones, whoever the victim was, or it's going to be the head honcho of the whole home repair fraud ring who's going to do likewise. He's going to pay the money that's necessary to get, Larry House or whoever it is that you've got, in handcuffs or down there at the police station. And that your client will then be made whole. That doesn't keep you from letting us know about what happened. We very much want to know about these incidents. We are very well networked with law enforcement across the state, and especially in eastern North Carolina, when it comes to these types of home repair gangs. Again, this one, this is called the Bob House Home Repair Gang, is based out of eastern North Carolina, so a lot of these district attorneys and detectives and police officers know exactly who they are. So if you let us know that Robert Prevette ripped off your client, we're going to know exactly where he is, who he deals with, and who else probably helped him out. So please do let us know in addition to getting the money back to your client. Also, in the Department of Thinking Outside the Box, there was a driveway paving scammer who really struck all up and down the East Coast. His name was Tommy Clack. And he hit 27 different homeowners with these driveway paving scams down in the Wilmington area. And one of the heads of the Area Agency of Aging down in Wilmington and surrounding counties, Jane Jones, she just couldn't stand it that so many of her constituents were being ripped off by this guy. So she got them all to go down and swear out criminal warrants under this statute, the 3-day cancellation statute. I mean, most of you know that there is a state statute and also a Federal Trade Commission regulation saying you must receive notice that you have 3 days to cancel any door-to-door sale, any in-home type sale. What you may not remember, or what a lot of people don't remember, is it's a criminal statute. So this woman, Jane Jones, went to the local sheriff's department, and together the sheriff and her clients or her victims took out misdemeanor warrants, 27 warrants against Tommy Clack. He was hauled into court. He was found guilty. He was ordered to make restitution. In addition to that, we were told about it. We filed an action on behalf of Attorney General Roy Cooper to put Mr. Clack out of business throughout North Carolina, which had another effect in that the IRS, realizing Mr. Clack probably makes a whole lot of money and doesn't declare them for tax purposes, they prosecuted him federally. And he is in federal prison right now because of these types of scams and because of somebody who wasn't even a lawyer thinking outside the box to get something done about him. So I have pretty much exhausted everything I wanted to talk about. Oh, here is a copy of one of our price gouging complaints. We really jump on these complaints as soon as they come in, whether it's for bottled water or for kerosene, for generators. We contact the company immediately, issue subpoenas to them if they don't cooperate. And it's very good for your client to file a complaint with us. You can do it online. This is a copy of our online complaint for price gouging, because almost immediately the first response of the filling station or Lowe's or whoever it might be is to make it right for your client. So here's our contact information. You can contact me at the Attorney General between now and December 30th, which is my last day. And after that, go straight and ask for Hugh Harris.
Cell phone number, man. No, I'm just kidding.
Do you want the next?
I don't know how
I'll be
the
quick.
presentation.
Okay, maybe they can set that up. I don't have a PowerPoint, so I'll go ahead and go and they can set yours up then. Okay. I'm Angie Dorsey, and I am the managing attorney of Legal Aid of North Carolina statewide senior law project. I know Jane Jones, and that doesn't surprise me one bit about what you just said about her. What I'm talking about today is something that comes after the fact, after what Mary from the Red Cross said were all the immediate needs that disaster victims have after they get their food, their shelter, their clothing, someplace safe to stay. Then they're going to start thinking about what they need to start rebuilding their life. And as you all know, that often requires documentation, whether it's identity documents, citizenship documents, whatever those are. They may not have them. Johnny mentioned earlier today about a client coming in with 1 page of a deed of trust. We have seniors who may have never had a birth certificate. So I heard somebody say earlier today, be bold, be creative, think outside the box. So the first thing I would do, if you've got somebody, a client, regardless of what their legal problem is, and you're having trouble establishing the necessary documentation that they need in order to pursue their legal claim, is figure out who might have the documents that your client's needs. And so that would be maybe does the school have copies of birth certificates, social security cards? What does the employer of the client have? Maybe there are some documents that they have that could help reestablish the identity documents that they need. Medical providers often have copies of insurance cards. Banks, particularly with seniors, a lot of times they do their banking in person, so the branch managers and the tellers know them. So they may be able to obtain a copy of their bank statements, which can be used to prove residence for some of these other documents. Utility companies, they can send a copy of the bill to the last address if that's possible. Also, don't forget to look to the courts. If they have court records that are public documents, those might be useful as well. I'm just going to briefly talk about the big 3, driver's license or state ID cards, birth certificates, and social security cards. If you're a North Carolina licensed driver or hold a current state-issued ID card, it's very easy to order a duplicate online at the ncdot.gov website. You follow the link to the DMV online. All you'll need then is a social security number, date of birth, valid email, and a debit or credit card. And the website has details on how to do that. If you don't have access to the internet or have an email or debit or credit card, you can also take documents in person to the DMV. Those are things that they'll take alternate forms of identification to show who you are. And I put some information in the materials about what they take. Those include tax forms, school transcripts or records, that are certified, military IDs, certified court documents too, like divorce decrees, name changes, adoptions, child support orders. Those can all be used to prove identity. So that's fairly straightforward on reestablishing those. Birth certificates can be found online can be ordered online as well. The North Carolina Vital Records has records from 1913 to present online. You can also get them, the birth certificates, at the Register of Deeds office in the county where the birth took place. There are people beyond the person whose birth certificate is who can get certified copies of birth certificates in North Carolina under North Carolina General Statute 130A93C, and that's in your materials as well. The person who's requesting their own copy can get it, as well as the person's spouse, sibling, direct ancestor, direct descendant, step-parent, or stepchild. So if they have identification, they can request that on behalf of a person who does not have their birth certificate or other ID. Also, a person seeking information for legal determination of personal property rights can get a birth certificate, as well as the authorized agent, attorney, or legal representative of one of those people described above. So with birth certificates, you're going to need a photo ID of the person requesting the certificate, or 2 copies of alternate documents, which are in the material. And those are things that your clients might be able to access more readily. Maybe a current utility bill with a current address, your car registration or title with current address, a pay stub, again with current address, tax returns or W-2s. And the one that I think is pretty interesting in light of what we're talking about today is a letter from a government agency within the last 6 months with your current address. So that could include a letter from FEMA on a claim that you made. More commonly, if your client's getting Social Security, if they have any letters from the Social Security Administration or the Veterans Administration, that's a fairly common one as well. They can use those too. I wanted to mention, this comes up occasionally, for someone who was not born in a hospital and has no birth certificate at all, and you'll see this with some older clients that, were born on the family farm. So if you have a person that's born in North Carolina that's more than 1 year old and for whom a birth certificate has not been registered, there is a process to file a delayed certificate of birth with the Register of Deeds in the county where he or she was born. And that starts with a formal search with the Vital Records site, and then they issue, if they don't find a birth certificate, then they issue a no certificate found letter. And then the client needs to take that letter to the Register of Deeds with alternate methods of proving the birth date. We've used in the past things like school records, family Bibles, church records, affidavits of family members or other people who may have been present at birth, things like that. Again, be creative in trying to come up with ways to show that that person was born on the date and the place where they said they were. So you can get one online. You can get a regular birth certificate online if you have an appropriate photo ID from whoever the requester is through the Vital Records website. As far as a Social Security card, North Carolina is not one of the states where you can request a replacement online. There's an application that has to be completed and then taken or mailed to the local Social Security Administration office. They need documentation to show your U.S. citizenship and your identity. So like if you have a birth certificate, that can show citizenship, but if you have a passport, that can hit both of them. That can show identity and citizenship. So besides passports, driver's license, and birth certificates, Social Security will also look at other documents to establish identity. And we've used some of these successfully with homeless individuals. You can get employee ID cards, school IDs, health insurance card other than Medicare, U.S. military IDs. We've used hospital ER records for homeless clients, along with maybe some records that they have established at different shelters where they've stayed to help prove who they were. There's other information in the packet on replacing other types of destroyed and damaged documents, on how to do military records, IRS tax returns. The IRS waives fees and expedites requests for people who need them related to a disaster. And there's also some information in there about reissuing EE savings bonds that are destroyed. So basically, the bottom line with finding documentation for your client is to be creative. Look to those other sources that might have records where your client might be able to obtain copies of documents that will help him prove who they are and their residency, and to begin rebuilding following a disaster.
Let's see if this is. I'm Carol Brook. I'm with the North Carolina Justice Center, and Kate Woomer-Dieters is our sort of resident expert on immigrants and disaster relief, but she was unable to come today. So I'm going to fill in. I can answer questions about immigrants in general and immigration status, but in terms of connecting it to disaster relief, she's your resource person, and her contact information will be on the last slide. I'm going to go over very briefly different types of immigration status and what immigrants may or may not be eligible for, and then some issues related to language access. given that Hurricane Matthew was in eastern North Carolina, where there's a large immigrant population, this certainly may come up in your work with clients. And so I wanted to just give a list of some of the many different types of immigration statuses that you may come across in your work with disaster victims. You don't need to know what all of these mean. We just wanted to kind of flag them so that you would know that they're out there, that people don't always know what their status is. They may think they do, but if you have any type of question, I would encourage you to contact either an immigration attorney, Kate from our office, or someone from Legal Aid who works regularly with the immigrant population, so that you can be sure that the person that you're trying to help is actually eligible for the benefits that they want to apply for. So in terms of trying to figure out what somebody's status is, don't just ask, do you have a green card? Which is sort of, I think, the general question that people who don't work regularly with immigrants think that they need to ask. Or do you have a Social Security card? Because that is not going to necessarily give you the answer that you need. Someone who doesn't have a green card may very well be eligible for benefits. Someone who has a Social Security number may not. So you can't rely on those questions to figure out if they're going to be eligible for disaster relief. But you can ask to see their actual documents, and you may or may not have enough knowledge to figure out from looking at those documents whether the person has the status that they need. And again, if you can't figure it out, then seek help from someone who does this work regularly. But some of the things that you might have somebody hand you are an approval notice from U.S. CIS, Citizenship and Immigration Services, which could indicate the type of status that the person has been approved for. They may have an employment authorization document, which you might know as a work permit. And on that, there's a little section called a category code where you can look up the type of status that the person has. So that can be pretty helpful. But just because somebody doesn't have an employment authorization document doesn't mean that they're not authorized to work. That's the other complicated thing. If they do have one, it can be helpful to pinpoint what type of status they have. And then they might have what is known as a green card, which is not green, but is the legal permanent resident card, or the I-551. And if someone has that and can show it to you, then you can be pretty confident of their status. I will point out, though, that they may have an expired green card. That is not something that should cause alarm. People can let their green card expire, but their status as a permanent resident does not end with the expiration of their card, unlike other types of immigration documents. Again, all of this just to sort of highlight some of the issues, not to make you think that you have to know everything there is to know about different types of immigration statuses or expiration dates in order to help people. The main distinction to keep in mind when you're looking at whether somebody is eligible for benefits is whether they fall into this qualified immigrant status. So immigrants can be lawfully present and able to work in the United States and still not be qualified immigrants for purposes of receiving these benefits. And then, of course, there are going to be people who are undocumented who are only eligible for certain very specific types of benefits. But in terms of the general things that you all are going to be looking for, you want to see if somebody is a qualified immigrant. And this is a term that came up during the Welfare Reform Act in 1996, where there was an attempt to narrow eligibility for public benefits, for means-tested public benefits, to this very narrow list of categories of legal permanent residents, which are people with a green card, people who are here permanently but not yet have their citizenship. Refugees, asylees, and persons granted withholding of deportation or removal. A refugee is someone who came with permission from another country because they were the victim of persecution in their home country, perhaps. An asylee is someone who experienced that persecution but didn't apply until they got here. And then Cuban and Haitian entrants, we put that on there. That's an important category. It's not one you're likely to run across, however. Just because someone's from Cuba or Haiti does not mean that they fit this category of Cuban or Haitian entrants. It was a time-limited program, and you would need a lot more information to figure out if they fall into that category. Same with this paroled into the U.S. for at least 1 year. That's a very small category of people, one you're not likely to run into. battered spouses and children, VAWA, I'm sure that folks in the various Lance offices have a lot of familiarity with that category and could help if you had any questions about whether someone was fit into the VAWA definition or not. And then not qualified, a not qualified immigrant is basically an immigrant who doesn't fit one of these statuses, and they may very well be legally present. For instance, someone with DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, the DREAM Act people. They are a not qualified immigrant, even though they are legally present, able to work, able to attend school, things like that. And that also includes other people in Eastern North Carolina who are here on agricultural visas, H-2A visas. They're here legally, they're legally able to work, but they are not qualified immigrants, even though they are lawfully present in the country. There are also people like in the Mount Olive area. There's a pretty good community of Haitian folks, many of whom have TPS or temporary protected status. They're legally able to work, they're lawfully present, but they are not qualified immigrants for purposes of receiving disaster-related benefits. And then, of course, we have a large undocumented population in North Carolina, and these are folks who are not lawfully present in the country. They may or may not have a Social Security number. Again, that's why that's not a good indicator of someone's status. You could, for instance, have come on a visa. Your visa has expired. You're no longer eligible to receive these types of benefits that we're discussing today, but you do have a Social Security number that's perfectly valid. So in terms of the benefits that you've covered here, FEMA cash benefits, the Individuals and Households Program, is restricted to people who fall in that qualified immigrant category or to U.S. citizens. And so if there is a household full of people with different statuses, then you're going to want to be able to ferret out who is a qualified immigrant, who is able to apply for those benefits in the household, and only have those people apply. It doesn't mean that they can't apply just because they live with undocumented people. That's a very common thing, that you might have one household member with status and others who don't. And so you want to ask about everybody. For disaster unemployment assistance, that's also restricted to U.S. citizens and qualified aliens, and that person must also have current work authorization. So that goes back to that employment authorization document that was on the slide with the different pictures of the cards. Usually someone with current work authorization is going to be able to show you a current employment authorization document that's not expired. There are some exceptions where somebody may have work authorization and not have that document. For instance, a green card holder does not need an employment authorization document, and they're able to work because they are permanent residents in the United States. But you should ask the person that you're working with if they're going to be applying for disaster and employment assistance, whether they have permission to work in the United States. And then look for that green card or that EAD. Now, there are some programs, federally funded programs, that are available to everyone, even undocumented persons, regardless of their status, and that's basically going to be emergency type of assistance. It's programs delivered at the community level where that assistance is not conditioned on somebody's income or resources, where it's available to anyone and where it's necessary to protect life or safety. And these are the types of programs that fall into that category. They're the kinds of things you would think of, you know, emergency medical assistance, fire, rescue, food, provision of food, water, medicine, other types of very basic emergency assistance. That is available regardless of the person's status. I'm just going to mention really quickly Title VI issues that can come up. Title VI, of course, is the part of the Civil Rights Act that requires programs that receive federal funds to not discriminate on the basis of national origin or lots of other things. But in this case, the national origin discrimination is important because it has been interpreted to include language access. So if you've got state agencies that are receiving federal funds to administer some of these assistance programs, they need to provide language access assistance if they are serving people with a significant number of people with these language needs. And so one thing that some of us in this room have been involved in is a complaint against the Department of Commerce for failing to provide adequate language access in their unemployment insurance and workforce programs for non-English speakers in North Carolina. They're currently in a settlement agreement with the Department of Labor, and they're working to improve that language access. But as you work on disaster unemployment benefits, if you run into problems with people not being able to access services because of inadequate language access, we would really like to hear about that. And John Keller's here, and Megan Mello from the Farm Worker Unit and I are all working on that, so we'd love to hear if you run into difficulties with that. And then I mentioned the issue of mixed status families, where you may have some people who are eligible, who are qualified immigrants, and some who are not. You want to just check and make sure that the person who is applying for benefits is eligible, and then to have those people make it clear that they are only applying for themselves and not for the ineligible people in their household. And generally, our office has encouraged people who have mixed status households to have eligible immigrants apply for benefits for which they're entitled, and have encouraged them to do that, and have reassured them that they are unlikely to suffer any kind of consequences in terms of, being investigated because other people in the household do not have status. I think that our advice at this point is still that, but we would just caution that we don't know if things may change in terms of how agencies share information with the new administration, so we want to flag that issue for post-January 20th. And then, other issues that may come up are lost documents. Angie has addressed some of those in terms of immigration-specific documents. There is assistance from USCIS to replace documents to help with missed deadlines because of a disaster and other types of consequences related to somebody's immigration status that is related to a disaster. So I would encourage you to check out that link. There's a lot of information there. And then we've got lots of resources about eligibility for immigrants for these different types of benefits. And I hope that copies of these slides are in your material so you don't have to try and rush to write these down. And I'd encourage people to contact Kate if you have further questions about any of this, because she had worked quite a bit on these issues when the tornado came through Raleigh a few years ago. Thank you very much. Lots of questions.
I have a question concerning those, who are coming from mixed families and when they're applying for benefits, because I guess I have a concern regarding eligibility, because if that person's in a household, they still have to report their income, but at the same time, they can't report them, I guess, as being part of their household for the benefits purposes. And I guess how to go about that, because it seems like that might knock some people out.
Yes, I mean, that's complicated with things like food stamps, too. So this is not sort of a new issue, and I think that FEMA has probably dealt with it pretty regularly. I think you just have to be very clear in the application. I'm applying only for myself. I live in a household that includes other people. I'm not applying for benefits on behalf of those people. If they request household income information, you could certainly provide that. But you just need to clarify that even though the household may have a larger income than just that person who's applying, you're not asking for help for that entire household.
And I guess part of my concern is, I guess kind of also related to criminal prosecution too, because some of these cases are prosecuted, and there are people who are saying, well, it was just an error on my part, I didn't understand, and I guess kind of to go about, I guess making sure that that information is clear, because it's not necessarily given to them, I guess kind of at the dealing with social services or anything.
Right. I mean, I think when you're assisting someone, you want to be very clear in your own mind who is and is not eligible to apply for those benefits, and to make sure that you're not helping them to apply for things for which they should not. I guess I would just encourage, if you have doubts about how to present that in the application, that you work with somebody who's very familiar with different immigration statuses to be sure that you're not crossing some kind of line. But it is a very common issue for mixed status families in all sorts of different contexts. Yeah. Did I see another hand? Yeah.
Just, the FEMA speaker, pretty sure it was, said that if there's a child, a U.S. citizen child in the home, you're eligible, that the family's eligible for FEMA benefits. Are there restrictions or limitations on that?
Well, so again, the U.S. citizen child certainly would be eligible for benefits. How FEMA deals with allocating benefits for a mixed status household, I couldn't speak to. I think that's encouraging if they're saying that having one person in the household who's eligible is enough to help the entire household. I think all you have to be careful about is who's the applicant, basically.
I have a two-part question. First is, it's hard not to bring the content of all four speakers together here and think about immigrants as victims of scams. And I don't know whether our disaster hotline, legal hotline, is sort of prepared to deal with that area, but I think many people understand that Legal Aid of North Carolina has some restrictions in terms of what we do. But if this privately, private attorney, legal aid, or legal services disaster helpline can help many immigrants who may or may not be eligible for legal aid services. If those services are available, we should get that word out really loud and clear. And I don't know whether David and Hugh, whether the Consumer Protection Division office, handles a high volume of scams targeting immigrants, and if there's something we need to do to get the word out, that's helpful.
Well, immigrants are targeted pretty heavily with scams, just as the disaster scams are specifically targeted. And I personally have helped consumers whose status is not, they don't have green cards, let's say, they're not here legally. But it doesn't stop us from trying to address the fraudulent conduct and the deceptive trade practices, because that's what we're here to enforce, is that statute.
It seems to me with not getting into the weeds on what you were presenting in terms of needing to know the specific status, there's a whole lot of people asking people for ID documents. And the flip side of what I'm hearing is that that provides unscrupulous people an opportunity to prey on people they may guess are here without legal status and then use their information to get that.
It does present that opportunity. The last couple that I was thinking about that I helped, it was a mobile home moving scam, and the guy knew they didn't have the correct status, took their $6,000 and ran, but we finally got the money back.
Yeah, I would just say from the Justice Center's perspective, I think if y'all are hearing about scams, and I'm sure that's probably true for the AG's office as well, we would be interested in working with you or accepting referrals around those issues as well.
Other questions? Great job. Thank you so much.
Thank you, George.
All right, well, there you have it. Any other issues that we failed to mention? We'll get you at the next CLE. Of course,
I'm trying to get rid of them because
there's a lot of unknowns in all of this, but what you heard today was the best of what we have to offer in terms of legal help for the many clients who will need us out there. Again, we're just at the very inchoate stages of this disaster in terms of what lawyers can do. In Floyd and in some of the other disasters, we were involved for 5 and 6 years on cases, and some of those did not even become salient until 2 or 3 years into the process. So I hope you'll stick with us. We hope to use you down the road, and good luck in all that you do. We need to do this in collaboration with each other. You have the names, you have the contacts. We want to work with you. We want to hear from you about the cases you're seeing, about the results that you're obtaining.
Thank you. And I just want to say thank you all for being here. On your way out, if you didn't on your way in, please make sure that we have your state bar number signed in at the registration desk. That is how we will report your CLE hours to the state bar. If you need a partial credit form, they're also available at the front desk. There are big garbage cans on either side of the auditorium on your way out. Thank you all for being here very much. We appreciate all the work that you're doing to assist these victims. Thanks. Thank you all.